Well, hello and happy Independence Day. I thought I would talk about something today that was kind of an instrumental moment for me. Uh, and it's happened a few times in my life. And I'm going to go back to when I was in basic training in the Army. And I had to go through with KP, Kitchen Police. And to get up for KP, we had to be up like at 3 in the morning. We had to go down to the mess hall, and they had all these things for us to do. And the cooks, it was like an initiation rite. So the cooks were noticeably mean, and some, the head cook being bordering on sadistic. So anyway, uh, we got through the morning rush, getting everything set up, and then the clean up, and then we had lunch, and then we had to go through the whole rush for that, and then the cleanup. And then it was important to try to look busy, because if you didn't, they'd find something really unpleasant and obnoxious for you to do. So I remember I was assigned the duty of the outside man who handles the garbage, right? And there were two pits. One was the edible garbage pit, which is an oxymoron in a sense. Edible garbage, you can eat garbage. No, it was food that was being thrown away, the leftovers, and then there was a pit for trash, for paper and other products, other than that which had been food. So anyway, I remember to endure this day, and it felt like it was endless, like never going to end. It's really, it's all they say about KP, at least for the basic training that you hear about, dealing with the cooks and the food and all that. So I remember thinking to myself, whatever the outside conditions are, these outer conditions I'm in, I can think about what I want to think about. I have the freedom. And so I have an inner freedom to choose the better feeling and the thought that serves me better and feels better. Those kind of thoughts. So I remember constructing a little poem that went like this. Our thoughts are our own. With no earthly thing need they fend. So let us ride upon them like winged steeds above the horror to the end. Let's transcend. So that was my little ditty that I put together to kind of run through my mind in order to endure and transcend that day. And fortunately, after dinner, I was a member of the post basketball team, which bothered my drill sergeant. He used to give me a little flack about it, but he was also proud that he had a member of his squad playing for the post. But anyway, got through that day. And at the same time, I'd been reading a book which was originally called From Death Camp to Existentialism by Victor Frankl, and then was retitled Man's Search for Meaning. And what happened, as I was reading it, I came across a part where Frankl was saying, you can strip everything from a man except the last of the human freedoms, the freedom to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. And that was a little bit after I'd finished basic training. I was reading this. And I was at my military occupational, especially MOS training in Georgia. I'd left Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson. Interesting with my name. And so I was at Fort Jackson. Then I went to Fort Gordon. So as I read that, I felt that, again, there was a way of dealing with some of the unpleasantness of basic training, of being in the Army, and finding a way of transcending it. And I remember when we were marching, I would look at the sunrise. We're up an ungodly hour, and you had to be awake and ready to go, and all your combat boots on and all that. And I remember marching, and I remember looking at this, and I was in the basic, not at MOS, at basic Fort Jackson. Beautiful sandy soil with these beautiful evergreens, tall evergreens, and the sunrise, and again I would notice the sunset when I was marching, And I would think about the movie Gone with the Wind and those beautiful vistas of the sunrises and the sunsets in that movie. And so I would be physically doing what I needed to do, but I had the accessing that inner freedom to run a movie in my mind to enjoy where I was. Now, that's what I would call inner freedom. And one of the ways that we access that, I later came up with a technique for that, which I call slaying the dragon of dependency. And the way that came to me was I had been reading a book by Stanislav Grof called The Holotropic Mind. And he talked about how we have the birth trauma that we go through, and we it's really repressed. We don't remember our birth trauma. But he devised a technique, holotropic breath work. Earlier, he had used LSD. Cary Grant was one that had used this to help release his traumas. But they stopped using LSD, and they just did this breath work, that you're doing this powerful breathing and listening to high-powered music, and you go into an altered state. And so what I found was he described that the stages of the birth canal, the birth experience. One, you're in the womb and the contractions haven't started. It's like you're in that symbiosis with mother, and it's supposed to be like images of paradise and Eden. And then when the contractions begin and the cervix is closed, there can be images of being trapped and imprisoned and so forth. And then as you start to go through the birth canal, he calls it the death rebirth struggle, and there's images of that, archetypal images of being in the dark and struggling and battling the hero, battling the dragon and so forth. And then at birth, one of the images he talked about that depicted what happened when you finally are out and safe was St. George slaying the dragon. So I remember thinking, God, that's an interesting image. And the dragon in Western mythology is this beast that is like devouring everything. He needs to be fed. It's a great image of dependency, of clinging and grasping, and all that the Buddhists talk about that cause suffering, clinging, grasping, and being attached. And so in the Western mythology, as Joseph Campbell has talked about it, the dragon is guarding the virgin, and he's guarding treasure, he's hoarding treasure, and he needs to be fed by the village people and so forth, like a kind of endless hunger. And so that dependency we have as childhood, when we come out of our mother's womb, and there's mother, our love affair with the material world. And I think it's interesting in Latin, mater for mother, and like it's an alma mater, for our schools. And matter, just one different letter with a T. And our love affair with the material world, with matter, seems to begin in our mother's arms, and that dependency. And so, growing up is gradually becoming more independent. We get our teddy bear and we hold that, and the transitional object when we're 2 or 3, and begin to move away from mommy. And so this overcoming dependency. Now, the next thing in that regard then was that we need to learn to slay the dragon of our dependency. And so I came up with an affirmation for that. And that went like this. So you're in a situation and you're finding yourself like I was when I was watching a movie, Braveheart, with a woman I was with, and we had been reunited, and I wanted her to watch the end. I've mentioned this in another video, where this beautiful reuniting is to take place on a spiritual level with William Wallace, played by Mel Gibson, and his wife, who was murdered earlier in the movie, is like weaving her spirit, the ghost of her spirit is weaving through the crowd, and they're about to be reunited. And I wanted to share that with this woman that I loved and I was reunited with. And she was resisting. No, I don't want to hear him in pain and so forth. And we were watching with another couple, and he said, just let me know when that's over with. So I find myself suddenly stopping inside and saying, I can enjoy the end of this movie without having to have her watch the end of the movie. And I came up with a statement. I said to myself, a more blanket statement. I said, and this was slaying the dragon of my dependency, my needing her to be a certain way so I can feel good and be at peace and enjoy myself. And so what I did, I said, stop in my mind, did a slow, deep breath, and breathing in, I said, I am not dependent on anything external to myself to feel good. Breathing out, I have everything I need within myself right now to feel good. And I said it in this blanket term, which would be to include, under that category would be needing her to watch the end of the movie. So rather than say specifically the situation, breathing in, I'm not dependent on her watching the end of the movie for me to enjoy it. Breathing out, I have everything I need within myself right now to enjoy the movie. So that's what happened. And after that night, she said, I feel so close to you. And I realized, and I was feeling just really free, inwardly free. And it gave her the space not to have to be a certain way for me. And she really appreciated that. She didn't know what had happened. She just felt the impact of my slaying that dependency in myself. Now, flash ahead, I had a patient who, and I've mentioned her before, who really, along the same lines, kind of spurred me to write the book, 8 Steps to Love, as did this experience regarding Braveheart. And the idea of slaying the dragon of dependency. So slay the dragon, not each other, because people get into conflict because they're needing the other person to be a certain way. And so I was finding myself really worrying about this woman who had been married to an alcoholic, divorced him, had the courage to divorce him. She was in her 40s, and she had 2 teenage children, a boy and a girl, and they both had kind of taken on the kind of sadistic, power-driven attitude of the alcoholic who had really intimidated her. And she would come in and she would begin to tell me the things that happened that week that she was upset about, that hurt her feelings. And as a good therapist, I was being empathetic and listening and clarifying her feelings. But inside, I was wanting to say, and I sometimes did, I said, okay, that's good. Let's get on to doing some assertiveness training so you can get stronger and be prepared to handle these situations. So I moved to a behavioral stance from just listening to her feelings, because I didn't want her to just vent, feel better, and go back and endure almost abuse that was similar to what she had suffered at the hands of her alcoholic husband. So I remember when it hit me that I was needing her to be a certain way. I was needing to fix her. I was needing to get her to be assertive, to take care of my anxiety, because I was anxious about what would happen to her. As I noticed that, I remember in the first session that happened, I stopped, I took a breath, not noticeably, just kind of took a breath, and inside I said, I am not dependent on her learning assertiveness training for me to feel good and less anxious. Breathing out, I have everything we need within myself right now to feel good and not be anxious. And that, slaying that within myself, cutting that cord of dependency, that grasping, that clinging. I don't need her to be a certain way. And as I did that, then I could say, let's stop for a minute. Let's get some assertiveness training. I want to really prepare you this week. So just that little difference in the edge of my voice, where I was coming inwardly, and she could feel the pressure, I'm sure, even though it was very subtle. But when that inner shift took place, where I was not going to need her to be a certain way for me to feel good, that inner freedom from the external conditions having to be a certain way, really made things go better. A similar situation was a woman I had who was so uptight about her. She was a very quiet woman, and her husband was a very outgoing, extroverted guy. And there was a scene where they were flying on vacation, and he was engaging everybody on the plane around them, making jokes and everything. And she was just wanting to shrink inside, being embarrassed. And I worked with her to help her see, I don't need my husband to be a certain way for me to feel good and be at peace. I can be at peace as my own person. And however you worded it, I then gave her the idea of practicing gratitude in that situation. Again, it's a way of slaying that dragon of dependency, only you practice gratitude. So I said, when he's doing that again, stop within yourself, breathe in, and visualize him in your mind and say, thank you for reminding me of how I don't want to be obnoxious as a person, whatever the adjective, or thanks you for reminding me how I don't want to be. You can label it, or you can just know in your mind what you're looking at that you don't want to be, like talking to everybody, making jokes, trying to be in the center of attention. Breathing out, thank you for reminding me how I do want to be. whether you fill it in with a calm, quiet person or just how I want to be, which is not like that. So breathing in, thank you for reminding me how I don't want to be. Thank you for reminding me, breathing out, how I do want to be. Now that's inner freedom. And that is that we have, like the prisoner of war that I studied with Victor Frankl when I studied him, and then there was a Captain Coffee in Vietnam. And similarly, each man focused on what they loved. Victor Frankl would think about his wife. He didn't know if she's still alive or not. He would think about times with them. He'd run the movies, the thoughts. He would choose those thoughts that made him feel good and not feel bad, and with hope, and infuse him with a future that he could think about. And same with Captain Coffee. So those men who gave into the moment, into the outer conditions, the horrible conditions, the dirty water that was a soup with a fish head floating in it. Instead of just looking at how horrible this was, Victor Frankl, would think about his wife and his love for his wife and what he loved to do. Now there was a man in Vietnam that Captain Coffee talked about, a prisoner of war, who focused on golf. So every day he would play golf in his mind. And actually, when he got out, he said that his golf game actually had improved. Of course, golf is a very mental game anyway. But so you can choose to focus on what you'd love to have happen in your life, or you can focus on what is happening and get yourself down and talk yourself into feeling depressed and so forth. Now that's inner freedom, the freedom to choose your attitude by choosing thoughts that help you feel good and not feel bad. And run those movies with the appropriate soundtrack, like I did with picturing the sunsets of Gone with the Wind, instead of thinking, oh gosh, I can't stand this, it's early, I'm trudging along, oh man. Stop, breathing in, thank you for reminding me how I don't want to be. Thank you for reminding me how I do want to be. I want to be inwardly free of these external conditions. Now, innermost freedom is a little different. And what that is when you and I realize that we are consciousness, that we are like the sky as consciousness, empty, illuminating, open, and that as the Buddhist poem by Shabgar begins, sky, empty and luminous, beyond all attachments, remains, meaning consciousness remains, that ever-present element of experience. And that space of consciousness, like the space of the sky, is empty, gazing down upon the clouds of stress of situations passing through it. Or I am like the sun, illuminating my experience without being affected by what my body and mind are experiencing. So you're going deeper beyond thought, almost as if you're on the riverbank, the Tibetan log meditation, where you step back to the riverbank and you stop trying to grab the logs that are like your thoughts and your feelings flowing down the ever stream of life, inner life, flowing constantly. You stop, take a breath, come back to the riverbank and let it go. Or imagine lying on the riverbank, looking up at the space of blue sky between the tall trees and watching the clouds come through and pass out the other side, and treating your thoughts and your feelings like you would a cloud. You can't push a cloud away. You can't grab a cloud. So learning to just step back into the paradise of your true nature, whose essence is love, peace in your mind, and joy throughout your body. That's where you tap into the innermost freedom. So you have inner freedom to choose your thoughts and slay the dragon of dependency, and you have the innermost freedom where you stop and you realize you're upset about something. You stop, take a breath, breathing in, I am that in which all this is taking place. Breathing out, I am unaffected by all that I'm witnessing. So you take the place of the witness. And you can use the stop, I'm not dependent on anything external to myself to feel good, breathing out everything within myself to feel good, be at peace and find fulfillment. So breathing in, I'm not dependent on anything external to myself to feel good, be at peace, and find fulfillment in the future even. And breathing out, I have everything I need right now, in the now, to feel good, be at peace, and find fulfillment. Again, breathing in, I am not dependent on anything external to myself or in the future to feel good, be at peace, and find fulfillment. Breathing out, I have everything I need within myself right now to feel good, be at peace, and find fulfillment. Because within yourself is that spacious awareness, like the sky, which is empty, like the empty space of a room. You can jump up and down in the room, things can happen in the room, the walls that encase the room can be blown out, but the empty space is unaffected. So, innermost freedom is what we've been talking about. When you and I realize we're consciousness, we're like that space in which things are arising and passing away. Like my breath arises, my breath passes away. And just like my breath, all things arise and all things pass away. But me, the ever-present element of every experience, consciousness, awareness, that ever-present element remains. And everything else, the content of experience, is changing all the time. And that's where we go into that place of silence, the silence between the sounds. So I am that which is like space, and I am that which is like silence. I, consciousness, awareness, am that which is like empty space. I, consciousness, awareness, am like that which is silence between the sounds. As I've said before, no music would be if we didn't have the space between the notes. You and I are that space, like presence of awareness. You and I are that silent space. So once in a while, as we're sitting here now, and you hear my voice, notice the space within which the sound of my voice is arising and passing away, and the sounds outside wherever you happen to be watching this. And the same thing, the sight of me is arising, and then you may look at something else, and that content of experience changes, but you, the ever-present element of experience, that awareness that you are, remains. Now, if you were your thoughts, if you were the sounds that were happening, when the sound disappeared, you disappear. When the thought changed from the thought of what I'm having for dinner or what I'm doing tomorrow changed, you disappear after those thoughts disappeared, but you don't disappear. So I am that in which all this is appearing. Sights, sounds, thoughts, feelings. And I am unaffected by all that's arising within me as consciousness. My body may have aches and pains, my mind, even a depression I might have. But I am that which witnesses, sees the depression arising, eventually passing away. So you go to that peaceful place. So you have two options. You can go to just inner freedom with your thoughts, or you can go to that innermost freedom. For what is really within you and with all of us is that love which is the ultimate power operating in the universe, and that is also peace and joy. So, happy Independence Day, and may you learn to really practice being inwardly free of the external conditions as well as the internal conditions, meaning thoughts and feelings, as well as those outer conditions like I was talking about when I was in the Army. So have a wonderful week, and I will see you again.